Imagine a world where the US dollar no longer holds the power it once did. For decades, the dollar has been the world's financial anchor, backing international trade, global reserves, and for many countries, serving as a safe harbor in times of crisis. But today, the global financial landscape is shifting in ways we've rarely seen before. Across the globe, there's a rising movement to diversify away from the dollar, driven by growing alliances like BRICS and a mounting stockpile of gold. Western economists, including Nobel laureates like Paul Krugman, may argue this trend is overhyped, calling it much ado about almost nothing. Yet prominent voices like Mohamed El-Erian, a former IMF advisor, view the changes as real and potentially transformative, with the power to shake up the foundations of global finance. This shift isn't just about numbers on a screen or balance sheets. It's about political independence and financial resilience. Countries are rethinking their reliance on the dollar, seeking alternatives that offer greater control and security. The implications are vast and complex, but they also carry real-world impact. Join us as we break down what this shift could mean for the world and how it might affect our daily lives. Are we seeing the start of a new financial era? Let's dive in to see what might be coming next. But before we dive in, do yourself a favor, go ahead and like this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on the latest updates. We're here to keep you in the loop on global events, major financial moves, and everything impacting the world economy, so stay connected. The US dollar has long reigned as the undisputed king of global currencies. But in recent years, whispers have turned into a steady hum. Is the era of dollar dominance beginning to wane? The question has sparked intense debate, particularly among Western economists and media commentators. Some insist that the dollar's supremacy is untouchable, while others, pointing to real changes in the international financial landscape, believe we may be seeing the early stages of a global shift. On one side, prominent voices in Western media argue that dollarization, the notion that other countries are systematically moving away from the dollar in favor of alternative currencies or commodities, is overhyped. Take, for example, Paul Krugman, a Nobel Prize-winning economist and columnist for the New York Times. In 2023, he wrote an article titled "Dollarization Debunked," where he laid out his view that the hype surrounding the decline of the US dollar is, as he put it, much ado about almost nothing. Citing a report by the US Federal Reserve, he pointed out that there's little chance the dollar's global status will significantly weaken. Krugman is far from alone in his skepticism. Many Western media outlets, from Business Insider to Foreign Policy magazine, have published articles suggesting that there is no real threat to the dollar's dominance. Business Insider, for instance, ran a piece dismissing the risks of dollarization with the title "Dollar Dominance Isn't Going Anywhere." Here are 5 myths about de-dollarization. Foreign Policy joined the fray by confidently asserting that there's simply no viable alternative to the US dollar on the global stage. Even Reuters offered some unsolicited advice to the BRICS alliance, an economic bloc of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, stating that BRICS would be better off disbanding rather than trying to counter Western influence. Yet the reality on the ground is more complex. While many Western economists dismiss dollarization, we're seeing real shifts in financial behavior across the globe that suggest otherwise. Mohamed El-Erian, a highly respected economist and former advisor to US President Barack Obama, recently published an article in the Financial Times that directly challenges the prevailing Western narrative. El-Erian, who also held high-ranking positions at the International Monetary Fund, IMF, observed that something unusual is indeed happening. According to El-Erian, the world's financial landscape is beginning to change, with some nations openly preparing for a future in which they are less dependent on the US dollar. In his words, the West should be paying more attention. El-Erian points to a fascinating indicator of this shift: the rise in gold prices. Historically, gold prices have been closely linked to inflation and interest rates. When inflation is high, for instance, gold prices typically surge because gold is seen as a safe asset that maintains its value over time. However, the recent rise in gold prices doesn't seem to align with traditional economic factors. Inflation in the US and many other countries has actually fallen in recent months, yet gold prices continue to climb. According to El-Erian, this anomaly can be traced to increased demand for gold from central banks around the world. This trend is particularly prominent in countries that are either part of BRICS or are BRICS curious, meaning they are interested in joining or aligning with the BRICS alliance. For these countries, buying gold serves as a form of insurance, a way to hold wealth outside the US-dominated financial system. This isn't just about economics, it's also about politics, and crucially, about independence from US financial influence. To understand why this shift is happening, it helps to look back at some recent geopolitical events. In 2022, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the US and the European Union imposed severe economic sanctions on Russia, including freezing approximately $300 billion worth of Russian assets held in Western financial institutions. For many countries around the world, this was a wake-up call. If the US and its allies could so easily seize Russia's financial assets, what was stopping them from doing the same to any other country that found itself at odds with Western policies? Nations that were once content to keep their wealth in dollar-denominated assets started to rethink their strategy. Even longtime US allies like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates began diversifying their reserves, turning to gold as a hedge against US influence. This growing trend of dollarization is one that Western media has largely ignored. Many commentators, including Paul Krugman, argue that there is simply no viable alternative to the US dollar, dismissing the BRICS nations as an economic alliance without any real power to challenge Western dominance. However, El Arian's article in the Financial Times serves as a reminder that these trends are very real and have the potential to reshape the global economy. Central banks across the BRICS countries, as well as in nations interested in aligning with BRICS, are accumulating gold and diversifying their assets in ways that could fundamentally alter the balance of financial power. For a clearer picture of where this movement might be heading, let's take a look at the recent BRICS summit held in Kazan, Russia. Here, Russian officials unveiled a series of ambitious proposals aimed at reducing reliance on the dollar. One of the most intriguing ideas discussed was the creation of a multi-currency payment system, designed to allow BRICS members to trade with each other using their local currencies instead of the dollar. Imagine a world where nations could settle their international debts using a mix of currencies and commodities, like gold or oil, without ever touching a dollar. Of course, creating a multi-currency system on this scale is no small task. It involves developing alternative banking networks, finding ways to bypass the SWIFT payment system that currently dominates global transactions, and even building digital currencies issued by central banks. These ideas are still in their early stages, but the ambition is clear. BRICS nations want a system that allows them to operate independently of US influence. And while this vision is far from being fully realized, it represents a direct challenge to the dollar-based system that has governed global finance for decades. Interestingly, one of the strongest motivations behind dollarization has to do with America's own fiscal policies. The US government's debt levels have skyrocketed in recent years, reaching over 120% of GDP as of 2024. Such a high level of debt can undermine confidence in the dollar as a stable currency. After all, if the US government is constantly running massive deficits and accumulating debt, why should other countries trust that the dollar will retain its value? For many foreign investors, the logic is simple. It's risky to hold dollar-based assets when the issuing government's finances are so precarious. Adding to this unease is the sheer size of the US military budget, which tops $1 trillion annually when accounting for related expenses. This level of spending, combined with tax cuts and other policies favoring corporations and the wealthy, has forced the US government to issue more and more treasury bonds to fund its operations. Yet in recent years, demand for US Treasury securities has waned, particularly from countries like China, which once held vast amounts of US debt. In fact, China's holdings of US Treasury securities peaked in 2014 at about $1.3 trillion and have since declined to nearly half of that level. For China, reducing its dollar-based holdings isn't just a financial decision, it's a strategic one, a way to insulate itself from potential US sanctions or economic pressure. As countries like China and other BRICS nations reduce their exposure to the dollar, a fascinating trend is emerging among US allies in Europe. In the past decade, European investors have actually increased their holdings of US Treasury securities, helping to compensate for the decline in demand from BRICS nations. This shift reveals a divide within the global economy. While emerging economies move away from the dollar, the US and its closest allies remain committed to the current system, at least for now. Still, the momentum toward dollarization is building. It's not an overnight process, and it may take years or even decades for the full effects to be felt. But the trends are clear. Mohamed El-Erian's article in the Financial Times is one of the few mainstream acknowledgments of this shift, and he's urging his Western colleagues to take it seriously. According to El-Erian, ignoring these changes won't stop them. It will only make the eventual adjustment more jarring for those who have staked their fortunes on the dollar's continued supremacy. Beyond geopolitics, another significant factor driving dollarization is the U.S.'s own economic policy. Over the past decade, the U.S. has repeatedly turned to expansive monetary and fiscal policies to stimulate growth and address economic downturns. While such policies can be effective in the short term, they have contributed to a mounting national debt that now exceeds the size of the entire U.S. economy. For foreign investors, this raises an uncomfortable question. If the U.S. government is borrowing so heavily, what will happen if it can't pay its debts? Interest rates offer a revealing insight into this issue. Typically, when the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates, it signals a period of low borrowing costs, which should theoretically make U.S. Treasury securities more attractive to investors. Yet in September 2024, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates by 50 basis points, or 0.5%. And instead of falling, the yield on 10-year Treasury bonds actually rose. This counterintuitive response suggests that investors are demanding higher returns to offset the perceived risk of holding U.S. debt. It's a clear sign that confidence in U.S. fiscal policy is wavering, even among some of the dollar's staunchest supporters. Amid these developments, another fascinating shift has occurred. U.S. allies in Europe have stepped up their investments in U.S. Treasury securities, effectively helping to fund the U.S. government. Countries like Canada, the United Kingdom, and even Taiwan have increased their holdings of U.S. debt over the past decade. While mainland China has been steadily dollarizing its reserves, Taiwan, which maintains close ties with the U.S., has actually been buying more Treasury securities. This divergence illustrates how geopolitical alliances are influencing financial decisions, with some nations continuing to back the dollar-based system, even as others seek alternatives. In the bigger picture, this evolving landscape poses profound questions for the future of global finance. While BRICS and other dollarizing countries are working to establish alternative systems, they face significant hurdles. Creating a multi-currency financial network requires not only the development of new payment systems, but also the establishment of a common regulatory framework that can handle transactions across multiple currencies. Additionally, the global economy is still heavily reliant on the US dollar, and breaking away from it will require years of coordinated effort. Yet the wheels are already in motion. The BRICS alliance is laying the groundwork for a new financial architecture, and central banks around the world are diversifying their reserves in ways that signal a future beyond the dollar. Mohamed El-Erian's article is a rare acknowledgement of these changes from within the Western economic establishment, and his message is clear. Ignoring these trends won't make them disappear. Instead, Western economists and policymakers would do well to recognize the long-term shift underway and consider its implications for the global economy. As this process unfolds, the dollar won't simply disappear from the global stage. It's far too embedded in international trade and finance for that. But what we're likely to see is a gradual erosion of the dollar's dominance, replaced by a more multipolar system, where countries rely on a combination of currencies, commodities, and alternative payment networks. For many in the global south, this represents a step toward financial independence and resilience, a way to safeguard their economies from the political risks associated with dollar-based assets. It's worth considering what this transition means for everyday people. The decline of dollar dominance could lead to more regional stability as nations gain greater control over their economic futures. For Americans, however, it may mean a world where the U.S. can no longer rely on its currency to maintain its global influence. This could have significant implications for the U.S. economy, potentially leading to higher borrowing costs and greater economic volatility. But if there's one thing that El-Erian's article makes clear, it's that change is coming, and the world would do well to pay attention. As we stand on the brink of what could be a new financial era, it's increasingly clear that the U.S. dollar's position as the world's dominant currency isn't as unshakable as it once seemed. For decades, the dollar has been more than just a currency. It's been a global anchor, providing stability and predictability in times of economic turmoil. But today, countries around the world are rethinking their reliance on the dollar, exploring alternatives like gold and regional alliances such as BRICS. This movement signals a growing commitment among these nations to establish more control over their financial futures, a response to the shifting dynamics in global power and economic influence. While some experts in the West insist that the dollar's role is secure, the actions of countries seeking greater independence tell a different story. For these nations, building reserves in other assets, especially gold, serves as a buffer, a way to protect themselves from the potential financial pressures tied to U.S. economic policies. As Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman argues, the dollar's decline might seem exaggerated. However, respected voices like Mohamed El-Erian suggest that these changes are indeed happening and could reshape the global economy in ways we may not fully understand yet. The impact of this shift isn't limited to balance sheets or international trade deals. It reaches far deeper. Imagine a world where countries settle their debts in diverse currencies or commodities, such as gold or oil, rather than defaulting to the dollar. It would mean more than just a change in numbers. It would represent a transformation in how nations interact economically and politically. For emerging economies and the global south, a multipolar currency system offers a path toward financial autonomy, reducing their dependency on the policies and economic cycles of the United States. For Americans, however, the decline of the dollar's dominance could have more immediate and potentially unsettling effects. A shift away from the dollar could lead to higher borrowing costs as the government issues more debt to keep up with its fiscal needs. It may even mean increased economic volatility, as the country's ability to influence global markets and currency values diminishes. This doesn't mean the dollar will disappear from the international stage, but it does suggest it might no longer hold the same unchallenged status it once did. The world is adapting, and the U.S. may need to do the same to navigate this new reality. But the most important takeaway is this: the signs are all around us. From rising gold prices to the increasing influence of alliances like BRICS, the wheels are in motion toward a different kind of global financial system. Ignoring these shifts won't make them vanish. If anything, it could leave those unprepared scrambling when the impact is fully felt. As Mohamed El-Erian cautions, the global financial community would do well to take these changes seriously. The US dollar may still play a key role, but a more diverse, multipolar financial world is clearly on the horizon. For everyday people, this transition may seem distant, but its effects could be surprisingly close to home. For those outside the US, it could mean more economic independence, with local economies less vulnerable to US financial decisions. For Americans, it's a moment to reflect on the potential shifts ahead. We're entering a world where multiple currencies, commodities, and economic networks could define international transactions, with far-reaching consequences for how nations manage their wealth, secure their futures, and exert influence on the global stage. Change is inevitable, and in this case, it's already underway. The world is taking notice, and so should we. In an era where financial landscapes are shifting rapidly, understanding and adapting to these trends is no longer optional. It's essential for anyone who wants to stay informed and prepared in a transforming global economy. What do you think? Are we on the edge of a new financial era, or will the US dollar hold its ground? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay in the loop on all things global finance and major economic shifts. Now, if you made it to the end and want more content like this, consider subscribing. Dropping a like would also be much appreciated. Either way, have a great day and thanks for watching. Bye.